Aye.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, take roll call. All five fire commissioners are present. So this is a public hearing. The Board of Fire Commissioners, the Belgium Cold Springs Fire District will hold a public hearing on Monday, July 11th, okay, 7 p.m. Belgium Cold Springs Fire Department Station 1 at 7920 River Road, Baldwinsville, to bring before and listen to the public comments of the residents of said fire district on the proposal to hire a paid fire chief and necessary staff as it becomes necessary to meet the needs of the community. This hearing is held in accordance with Section 176(11)(c of Town Law. The Secretary of the Fire District has filed with this district an affidavit stating that the notice of this public hearing was published or posted at least once 5 days before the date specified for the hearing in the official newspaper of the fire district, the official signboard of the town or towns where the fire district is located, on the fire district's website, and on the town or town website, town's website where the district is located. The notice of public hearing specified the time and date, when and the place where this public hearing would be held. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow members of the public to make comments on the proposal. Any person may be heard in favor of or against the proposal or wish to make comments about the proposal. Please note that this proposal is subject to the approval of the Board of Fire Commissioners. Prior to public comment portion of this public hearing, we will hear from Fire Commissioner Jeremy Patterson, who will make a presentation about the proposal to the Board of Fire Commissioners and members of the public.
All right, first off, can everybody hear me? Good? Thank you to everyone for coming out. I know this is an emotionally charged topic. I know there's a lot of feelings for and against. So we're going to talk about facts. We're going to talk about what we're proposing. Here is the agenda for tonight. We're going to give a district presentation. That's what we're doing right now. We're going to give our background, our facts, our reasons. No comments or questions during the presentation. Public comment is after the presentation. If you cause a disruption during the presentation, you will be asked to leave. You will have time to do public comments after this presentation is done. So keep that in mind. What are we going to be looking at? So tonight, what we want to cover, the difference between the fire district and the fire department. I think that's very confusing, and a lot of people don't understand the difference, so we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about why we're here today, tonight, what we are proposing and what we're not proposing. So we want to be very clear on what we are proposing and what we're not proposing. We're going to talk about the district, the Belgium Cold Springs Fire District demographics, and how they've changed since 1949 when this district was developed or created. We're going to talk about time requirements for our volunteers and what's happened since 1949 until today. We're going to talk about the aging volunteer population and the challenges we have as a fire department across New York State, across the country, trying to find newer volunteers. We're going to talk about response concerns, And then finally, the financial plan and impact taxpayers. There's been a lot of rumors about that too, and we're gonna put those to bed. So we'll give you the facts. Next slide. So this difference between the district and the fire department, I think for Belgium it's confusing because it's Belgium Cold Springs Fire District, Belgium Cold Springs Fire Department. The names are almost identical. What is the difference? A district is a political subdivision established for the purpose of providing fire protection and responding to other certain types of emergencies in the town. So it is the district's job to ensure that the residents, the taxpayers, have appropriate coverage for fire and other emergency services. That's the job of the district. As of December 2015, that's the latest stat I could find, there are 886 fire districts in New York State. Typically, a district chops up a town into fire districts. So, the town of Lysander has a couple. Everybody has a couple. The district is the authority having jurisdiction for their respective area, which means the district Board of Fire Commissioners makes all the decisions for fire, medic, and emergency services decisions in our respective areas. That's our job, to ensure that taxpayers have the services that they are paying for. Commissioners the district board, the Board of Fire Commissioners, is made up of 5 commissioners. On average, 1 elected every year to a 5-year term. It is 100% volunteer, and you must be a resident of the fire district. So you have to be a taxpayer inside the district if you're going to be a fire commissioner. We're going to talk about that. The district is the authority over fire service for their geographic area. So what is the department? The department is a membership-based organization that provides services to the district. In our case, it's exactly the same name, Belgium Cold Springs Fire Department, it's a district. It is a membership entity. Ours happens to be a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Other fire districts in the area, Northwest, is actually we have 2 fire departments providing the services to the Northwest Fire District. What are we proposing? We are looking into the possibility of hiring a paid chief and support staff or staff to support with alarms and other duties for the Belgium Cold Springs Fire District. This allows us, the district, to supplement our volunteer staff and address the needs of our residents. We'll talk about some of the constraints. This does not mean, and I want to emphasize this, it does not mean our volunteers are unwilling or unable to provide this service. It simply means that the demands of the current fire service are more than our staffing currently can. And we'll talk about why, excuse me, very soon. What we aren't proposing, our volunteer members are the backbone on which this district has been built. All 5 fire commissioners are members of the Belgium Cold Springs Fire Department. And all 5 are members. This proposal is intended to supplement the existing volunteer membership. Right? We're struggling in certain areas. We can't get new membership. How do we address it? How do we fix it? Ultimately, the district is responsible for making sure the services the taxpayers are paying for is being rendered to them. This does not change how the volunteer firefighters serve our community. We're not getting rid of the volunteer fire department. We're supplementing their activities. What are the challenges? Let's talk about why we're here tonight. Belgium Cold Springs Fire District and Department is in the same situation as pretty much every volunteer organization, volunteer fire department organization across New York State and the country. We're not unique in these challenges we're about to talk about. So the things we're going to cover tonight: time commitments, changing fire department demographics, our aging volunteer population, and our need to provide on time, every time, with a crew that's trained for the needs of our residents. Those are the 4 main challenges we're going to discuss. First up, time. Since 1949, the training demands for a volunteer firefighter, EMT, or firefighter EMT has drastically increased. We're going to look at initial training, the ongoing annual training, and then adding into that the time requirements for alarm. We're just going to take a look at the math. Here's the minimum firefighter training requirements since 1970. I believe they call it EF1, something for firefighters. Yeah, 59 hours. That remained pretty flat until 2000. Jumped up to 78. 10 years later, 114. This is initial minimum training for your first year firefighter. Today, we're at 129 hours of classroom training for interior firefighters. I want to drill down into interior firefighter training requirements. This is, we're going to look at year 1 versus year 2 and beyond. How many hours of training is required for an interior firefighter? Initial interior firefighter is made up of 2 classes. We call it BFO, IFO. What basic exterior firefighting operations, interior firefighting operations. That's 79 and 50 hours respectively. That's where we get the 129 hours for an interior firefighter classroom. Add on top of that annual training. Anybody who works in New York State, there's required mandatory harassment and sexual harassment training every year. We have to do that here. That's give or take 2 hours. We also are required by OSHA to do bloodborne training every year. That's a 2-hour class. We have our CPR AED refresh. It's about 3 hours. Interior firefighters have to do what's called a task-oriented air consumption requalification. That's where we have to put on a pack, go through an obstacle course, make sure we can get through it on one hand. That's about 3 hours of drilling. Then we have personal rescue equipment. In our pants, we have a hook with rope tied to a harness. It's to help us bail out of buildings in the event it gets really bad. Every year, we have to requalify on that in order to maintain that interior firefighter status. That's another drill night, that's 3 hours. These are every year. Our members are required to attend 7 drills per year. Every drill is about 3 hours. That's 21 hours. And they're required to attend 3 business meetings for the department. 3 hours per year, 9 hours. So what does that work out to be? Year 1 total for a brand new firefighter who wants to be an interior firefighter. It's 172 hours of training. That's 22 8-hour days, 4.5 work weeks. Classroom-based training. We're not talking about responding. This is just the training. Year 2 and beyond, your annual stuff that comes up every year, 43 hours, 5 8-hour days, and 1 work week. That's an interior firefighter. EMT, bump up the hours, takes a little more time. The initial EMT training is 200 plus hours. That includes the classroom, lab, practical, ride times with a ALS agency to get your drive time in. So 200 hours there. Ongoing, you have to do 130 hours of CMEs every 3 years. So that works out to be about 44 hours a year, split up across the 3. New York State training we talked about, OSHA we talked about, CPR we talked about, and then our annual skills requalification. Every year we got to refresh on certain skills. That's about a drill night, so 3 hours. Drills and business meetings, same as it was for a firefighter, 7 a year, 3 a year. What does that work out to be? Year 1 for an EMT, 237 hours. That's 38-hour days, 6 work weeks. Year 2 and beyond, that's 81 hours, 10 8-hour days, 2 work weeks. So it's more for an EMT. Here's the thing. And we have a lot of these firefighter EMTs. We maintain both certifications. We already talked about the 129 hours. We looked at the 200 plus for the EMT. All the annual training adds up to 57 drills, business meetings. So if you want to be an interior firefighter with your EMT certification, year 1, 416 hours, 52 8-hour days, or 10.5 weeks of training. Year 2 and beyond, it's 87 hours, 11 days, or 2 weeks. Now let's talk about actually responding to calls. Why do we take all the training? Because we want to respond to calls and help the public. We get about 500 calls a year at Belgium. Our members are required to respond to 10% of those. If they respond to 10% of them, they qualify for our LOSAT program, which if you're not in the fire service, LOSAT is Length of Service Awards program. Think of it as a retirement plan for volunteers. So if you meet your minimum, which is set by the state for drills, training, alarms, the district will put $1,200 into a retirement account for you, just like a 401k or a 403b, whatever you use. So that's the 10%. Average time spent in alarming, we're averaging here, but fires, depending on the fire, this thing, we could be way off, but 4 to 8, 2 to 8, somewhere around in that area for a fire call. Most of your EMS calls is an hour from the time you leave the house to the time you get back. And false alarms, typically less than that. So if we add training on top of alarms, what do we get? Interior firefighter, we're now up to 232 hours, 29 days, 6 weeks. EMT, first year, 287 hours, 35 days, 7 weeks. And the pinnacle here, firefighter EMT, it's the most at 476, 60 days, 12 work weeks of training and alarms. Minimum, this is the minimum. Right, there's additional training on top of this if you want to be a lieutenant. You do accident next week. There's a whole bunch of training you can take. This is the bare minimum. So, put it this way. Here's the challenge we have with time. American families don't have the same amount of free time as they've had in the past. Lots of reasons why we picked out just 2. Dual income households, less free time. The big one, at least in my neighborhood, kids activities. Take up a ton of time. Sports activities, arts, music, club, you name it. When I was growing up, there was the regular season. If you played baseball, it was X to Y. If you played football, it was in the fall. Sports today are year-round activities, and they're traveling all over the place to go to those. Even the marching band. I don't know if you guys saw the news article a couple weeks ago. They got into 2 big shows, not really local, so they've got fundraising and activities to support that too. So everything takes more time, which means less time for the fire service. This is a poll from Gallup, basically the last 20 years. Volunteerism, which is this blue line at the bottom, is decreasing every year, year after year. Increasing, surprisingly enough, is monetary donations. What this basically demonstrates is people are more willing to give money than time. They don't have the time. This is kind of neat. So the U.S. Census in 2003 started what they call the American Time Use Survey. So they interview all the Americans during the census, and they come up with how much time is spent on different activities for the average American. As we go through the list, the one I have highlighted, the very crooked line, it's hard to do that with a mouse, but volunteer activities. This is 2003, 0.14 hours a day. Average American spends on volunteering. That works out to be, if you do the math, 8.5 minutes a day. 1 hour a week, 52 hours a year. That's back in 2003. Fast forward, the latest data from the U.S. Census is last year's. It's decreased 36%. The average American now spends 0.09 hours on volunteering. That's 5.5 minutes a day. 38 minutes a week, 33.5 hours a year. Now, we just talked about all the hours of training, all the hours of alarms. What does that mean for an average American? If we use the 2021 data, 5.5 minutes a day for your average American, it would take them 7 years to complete the interior firefighter training requirement, minimum training requirements. It would take them 8.5 years for an EMT, and it would take them 14 years to complete the combination firefighter, EMT, minimum training requirements. This is the barrier to entry to volunteer service. When it comes to time, this kills us. So how do we fix it? What is the answer? Well, if we're talking about time, back to this census survey, volunteering activities is 0.09, working is 3.50 hours. So the average American spends 3.5, I don't know what job that is, but it's a nice one. 3.5 hours working. If we move some of these tasks, some of these burdens from volunteer to paid staff, What does that mean for our training? If we take a volunteer and make them a paid staff, now the firefighter goes from whatever, I forget what it was. Okay. 7 years for a firefighter, it's down to 66 days if they're paid staff. It goes from 8.5 years for an EMT to 82 days. For a firefighter EMT, we go from 14 years to 136 days. Which, anybody who is in the field, you look at Montour Falls for the training, that's about what that is. To get your EMT and your firefighter 1 certification, that's about how long it takes. So just the time challenge. Challenge number 1 for us, time. Americans have less free time than in the past. Training requirements for firefighters and EMTs, it's not going to decrease. It's a dangerous job. Our lives are at stake, the residents' lives are at stake. We can't lower the bar. Volunteerism continues a downward spiral. We saw that graph from Dept. It's decreasing every year. The average American doesn't have the time to do what we're currently doing here. And here's the other challenge. If we do find a new volunteer, it is not long before they become overwhelmed with the amount of training, hours, time, days, weeks, months, to even respond in a useful fashion operating. Monetary donations are increased. Yeah, from the gallery. Here's the other challenge we have. Changing district demographics. Belgium Cold Springs Fire District was formed in 1949. Take a time machine back to 1949. This entire district is almost all farmland or vacant land. Very little residential homes. It's the ideal setup for the volunteer fire service, in all honesty. That's the wheelhouse for the volunteer fire service. Rural, residential, not a lot of property being protected. Our area's experienced a lot of growth, and we're going to demonstrate that over the last 25 years. Our volunteer fire service hasn't grown in the same fashion. The town of Lysander has seen a 346% increase in population since 1940. This is the whole town of Lysander, not the district. We'll talk about that in a second. But here's where we were formed. They're around here. Here's where we are today. A significant increase. Changes in district property. In 1950, our district, when it was first created, the assessed value was $698,000. Adjusted for today's inflation, that's about $8.5 million. That's the total value of all the homes, farms, everything on our property. Today, the assessed value of the Belgium Cool Springs Fire District is about $1.26 billion. 150 times increase in the amount of assessment. What contributed? Number 1 is Radisson. What we know as Radisson today didn't exist for about the first 30 years of the Belgium Cool Springs Fire District. We'll take some historical slides here and look at it, but it's known as the project. It was a government installation for creating explosives for milk. That's what all the property for Radisson was. The Radisson we know today didn't come into existence until about late 70s, early 80s, I think. Here's an aerial picture of Radisson from about 1945. This is the property. A little bit going on here. These are munitions factory or explosives factory, whatever it is they're doing there. This is Radisson. And this is Radisson. This is the government buildings. According, I don't know if this is true or not, but according to the website, this is 31 here, and this is what would eventually come with it. But I can confirm or deny that, so take it with a grain of salt. But that's Radisson. back in 1945. That's Radisson up until the 70s. 70 years is a lot of time. So I give you a lot can change in 70 years. Let's take a look at the last 25 years. We're going to look at some shots from Google Earth, 1995 versus 2019. Look at the difference in our district in just 25 years. First one up, this is Timber Banks. What you see here is just Google overlaying what will be roads, but it's all vacant farmland. 2019, fully developed Timber Banks. You got the golf course, YMCA, the new neighborhood being built back here, which is actually bigger than this photo shows. That's timber. Whitetail, further downriver. This is where whitetail will exist. Again, just an overlay. These roads aren't there. It's all farmland. Where is that? Probably some of the most expensive homes in our area. This is Clinton Heights, Abbott's Landing, Polygon. Right, back in 1995, they actually are 3 separate developments, not connected. In 25 years, this is all one big neighborhood, all connected. And this is why when people move in, they don't understand why there's 3 different names for one neighborhood. Right? Back 25 years ago, there's 3 separate neighborhoods. Today, all one. 1995, Collington. Again, just an overlay of roads, nothing there. It's all farmland. Talmont down here, nothing there, farmland. And what is going to become Apple River, I believe. I'm going to show it right here. That's 1995. Here we are today. Right, full neighborhood. This is under development. This is all new. This one kind of too. Radisson. This is 1995. Here's Willow. Red one. Nothing developed in this area. It's a middle area. All through it's vacant. Fast forward. That's Radisson today. Just a section of this. So that's what exists. Let's talk about what's coming. There's a solar farm being built across from the line of escape. That brings with it its own hazards and challenges. We have new apartments being developed right on the corner of 31 and Drake's, this area here. There's a new apartment complex. We'll started yet, but they'll start soon. And right on the corner of Hicks Hayes and 370, there has been talk of a 400+ home neighborhood being developed. That's all on the table. Here's the other big thing that's impacted us, changes in industry. What are we looking at in our backyard? Today the district's heavily populated with residential, and it continues to grow each year. The other area that we got to look at is industrial. These are some of the examples of the bigger players in our district. Budweiser, biggest brewery in the Northeast. Clay Northeast, constant truck traffic. Brown Foods, G&L, Gypsum, Paperworks, YMCA, Three River Sports Complex, Giovanni, and just recently the Baldwinville Transportation Center. All adding traffic and people to our district during the day. Typically, our area will be considered a bedroom community. Everybody sleeps, eats here, gets up, goes to work, and we're kind of vacant during the day, and everybody comes back. Industry kind of skews it for us. So while many of us are going to work, there's a bunch of people that are coming here to go to work. So it actually skews. We have more calls from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. than we do 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. by about 8%, about 50 calls. So here's a look back, BCSFD, when we were formed, where we are today. District population, 800 when we first started. 9,500 today. Over 1,000% increase in residents. Assessed value, 8.5 million. Again, that's adjusted for inflation, about 600,000 back then. We're over 1.2 billion. Almost a 15,000% increase in assessment. what we're protecting. Active members, here's the problem. In 1949, we had 64 active members. Today, we have 44. It's gone down to 31%. Firefighter ratio, 1 to 12. That means you could probably throw a stone back in 1949 in any direction and hit a firefighter. There's only 800 people. One of your neighbors, if not you, one of your neighbors was probably a firefighter. Today, 1 to 216. I live in Abbott's Landing. I only know one other firefighter in my neighborhood. Aging volunteer population is the other issue. Because of the downward trend in volunteerism, the age of our volunteers every year is increasing and increasing. It's not unique to us. This is not a Belgian problem. This is a problem across the entire fire service. Here's some of the things we've tried over the last 5, 6, 7 years to try to gain more traction for recruits. We created these 3 new categories. So if you don't have the time commitment to be an interior firefighter, we created an exterior firefighter. If you don't want to do any firefighting, we created the driver only. If you've already put in your time and all you want to do is drive the trucks, you can do that. And we had a bunch of medical staff, retired or not, who wanted to get involved but wasn't interested in firefighting. So we created the EMS only, EMT only. We talked about LoSAP. So some things the district provides, that service award, $1,200 a year into a retirement account if you meet your minimums. There's the BFDL, which is insurance coverage for you if you get hurt or injured. We have coverage above and beyond BFDL for our members. We have life insurance for all active members. We have cancer coverage for all active members. We pay for a gym membership for all active. Well, we pay $200 for a gym membership for all active members. And we provide annual physicals. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but it saves lives. So it's a nice benefit. Public events. We get involved with Founders Day at Radisson. Big trucks, little kids at the Lysander Town Park. Page's Butterfly Run, Abbott's Strawberry Festival, Baker High School Annual Scholarship. We do a scholarship every year for 2 people who are getting into public service or healthcare. And we do a ton of other stuff, odds and ends with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, you name it. There's events where you'll probably see a Belgian truck. Some other stuff we've tried. The Recruit New York event happens in April every year. Hasn't been really successful for us. I don't think it's been successful for anybody. We have spent a lot of time and money on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram ad campaigns. We're trying to get the younger crowd. We want to focus our marketing efforts on the younger crowd. Not much traction. We've created video content, static content, you name it. We've got tons of impressions, a lot of hits. People watch the video, they clicked on our website. That's where it stops. So, not much there. We created a welcome program under Chief Kearney. This is his project. He wanted to create kind of a welcome mat. So we would visit all new homeowners with a fire extinguisher, fire prevention information, information on the fire department district, how to join, and some other like pens and whatever with our logo on it. So we would personally visit every new resident in this district, and still do it with the welcome. Duty crews. Chief's speech implemented duty crews. So we are fully supportive. If people want to come up, staff an engine for the night, overnight, morning, whatever. We will pay for food to put a crew together and answer calls while you're here. That dovetails into the Engine 91 program, which is a town Lysander, kind of a mutual aid type project where we will work with the other fire departments in our town and we'll staff an engine. So it might be somebody from Belgium, 2 people from Beeville, and somebody from Plainville on one engine. They'll answer calls for the whole town. That's been more successful, I think, than our duty nights, but still limited success, I would say. Moving Forward Committee. That's kind of why we're here today. So back in 2018, the Lysander, what do we call it? The Lysander Public Safety Group, which is made up of all the different public safety organizations from the town of Lysander, fire, EMS, police. they started this moving forward committee, which was, look, we know there's a problem in the volunteer fire service. What are we going to do? How do we address this? It's not just a Belgium issue, it's not just a Beagle issue, it's not just a Lysander or Plainville issue. It's across the board. How do we fix it? All right, it became so bad, 2021, they folded it back into the bigger Lysander Public Safety Group. It's no longer a subcommittee, it's a primary topic in that meeting. Safer Grant. VCSFD for the last, 10, 12 years has gotten grants from the federal government to support the high school program, which teaches EMS and fire training. The idea there was if you get them young, get them interested, maybe they'll join. One of the challenges we have in Belgium, we don't have a lot of startups. So somebody just out of college or somebody just out of high school, most of our builds are all new. We were vacant 50 years ago, and it's all new builds. Not a lot of people coming out of college or high school living in that district. So we miss that whole opportunity. Our apartments aren't that cheap either. So again, not really starter apartments. So we lose that whole younger demographic who are just getting out of school. Here's the numbers across the U.S. New York, 2000 to 2020, number of volunteers has dropped 34%. This was fast. North Carolina, number of volunteers has dropped 22% in just 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. This one here, Pennsylvania. They had 300,000 volunteers in 1970. In 2019, they had 48,000. Nationwide, since 1980, paid firefighter EMT staffing has increased 65%. 65% increase since 1980. That's due to these numbers. And when we don't have the volunteer staffing, we have to supplement the paid staffing. Here's the other challenge. An aging population. Again, we can't backfill our volunteers with younger people. So every year, we shift that slide ever so slightly to the older population. As a side note, in New York State, if this was a career department, you have to retire at 62. You're done. That's the rules. 41% of our members would no longer be eligible for active firefighter if we were held to the same standard. We would lose 41% of our current active firefighters. Here's the makeup of the BCSFD demographic. So under 40, we have 9 members, active members, under the age of 40. Over 40, 34 members. 79% of our active members are over 40. 13 of them are interior. 6 under 40. So again, we created those other categories where you don't have to be an interior firefighter. You can be an EMT, driver only, exterior. That's the difference between this number and this number. If you zoom in a little tighter. Again, of the 43 responding active members we have, 9 fall in the 18 to 39 age, 16 in the 40 to 59, and 18 are over 60. Our job as the district is we have to plan for the future. Okay? It's not today that we're worried about, it's 5 years from now, it's 10 years from now. Now, you cannot implement chief support staff overnight. It takes time. This is step 1 of a multi-step process. Here's the other concern, scratch and call. So again, those of you not in the fire service, a scratch is when we are activated for an emergency and either nobody shows up or the right crew doesn't show up and we can't roll a rig. So 2 main reasons for a scratch: 0 response, or maybe you get an EMT who can't drive the squad, or you get somebody to drive the squad but there's no EMT, or we have a fire call and there's no interiors, or we get a bunch of interiors and there's nobody to drive the fire engine. Any combination of that, that's a scratch. We didn't get a rig out. We missed it. Since January 1st of this year, we've scratched 25 calls. That's nearly a 10% scratch ratio for Belgium Springs. 500 calls a year on average, that's 50 calls we're going to miss. unacceptable. You can't do it. And it's not the fault of the volunteers. There's not enough people to fill the time demands that we require. This has nothing to do with our volunteers. So what does the paid staff mean for our volunteers? Nothing. The volunteer fire department, Belgium Cold Springs Volunteer Fire Department, will continue to exist. Paid staff will supplement the needs and help offset the current volunteer shortage. Again, we're sort of a bedroom community. People are gone during the day. That's sort of our biggest need right now. If we continue the downward trend, and you saw the age of the volunteers, if we don't backfill and they continue to age out, we're going to lose 41% of our volunteers. What would you do then? The scratch rate will go up. Moving forward with this proposal allows the district to respond to staffing needs quicker and ensure adequate coverage for the emergency services of the residents, aka taxpayers. And that's what this proposal allows. So, why a firefighter / EMT? Which is kind of what we're looking at. We want someone in both interior and EMT. Primary purpose of the fire service is the protection and preservation of property and life. I should say life and property. Right? Life first, property second. EMS is a key component to preserving and protecting life. The EMS demands on the fire service have increased over the years, especially during COVID. And anybody in the know, the EMS service, the ambulances, pre-hospital care, the emergency rooms, we're stretched past the limit over the last 2 years. Right? It's been bad. Typically, we get a GBAC rig or we get an over rig. GBAC is busy. We've been pulling rigs from the city of Syracuse, Riverton, NAVAC out of North Syracuse, and it takes a long time for them to get here. Lights and sirens are not. It's a ways to go from Riverton to Baltimore. So our EMTs are the first on scene for many calls. And they might be the only one on scene for 5, 10, or 15 minutes if we lose our primary EMS provider, GBAC. Paid staff will be firefighter EMTs to address that specifically. So here's an interesting slide. This is from NFPA. It's the last 50 years of fire versus EMS. This is 1980. Basically 1/3, 1/3, right? Or 1/3, 2/3. 2/3 of the calls coming in across the nation are EMS. The other third are fire calls. 10 years later, it's shrinking. Now we're basically 80-20. 2000, 88-12%. A lot of blue, a lot of EMS. 2010, 93%, 7% fire. 2020, 94% of the calls coming into fire departments today are EMS. Only 6 are fire. This is from NFPA. Why pay cheap? It's the time commitment, it's the workload, it's an unexpected reality for someone who's a volunteer. All right, our fire chief right now currently does fire reports, our EMS certification and training requirements, a new EPCR program that we've implemented, with EMS equipment and supplies, ordering, working with the EMS folks to figure out what needs to be ordered. It attends a bunch of meetings. One thing the fire service isn't short of is meetings, and the chief or assistant chiefs have to attend those. Coordinate, schedule training to ensure compliance. Manage the vehicle and equipment needs, all rigs, all the chief's vehicles. Manage our SOGs, standard operating guidelines, our policies, and not to mention future launch responses. Paid chief will provide a solid foundation and structure for the management of the fire service for the fire district. It creates a stable and consistent leader at the top of the fireman chain. One of the challenges we have in the volunteer fire service, and anybody who's in it, every year we have a election for chief, which means once a year, someone has to get enough votes to be the chief. If you do sometimes what's right and what's popular are not the same thing. So if you do what's right, chances are you might get booted out as the chief, because you are no longer popular. Right? Or if you do what's popular, it might not be right for the district. That's the challenge. Every year, we've got that election. Paid chief will give us stability in the rank. What does this mean for the taxpayer? So let's get down to brass tacks, the money. Right? Lots of rumors going around on this one, so let's talk about it. Currently, we employ right now 2 full-time caretakers. Salary, benefits, and overtime is about $159,000 a year for those 2. We're going to recategorize that money and reinvest it towards firefighting and EMS. Right, so we're going to take that 159, we're going to back out 50 of it for third-party tasks. Excuse me. If we need to get mechanical work, right now we have a mechanic on staff. Who does oil changes, brakes, fire changes, that kind of stuff. They do mowing, they do snow plowing. The paid staff will be able to borrow, paid staff will be able to do some of those maintenance tasks. Some of it's unrealistic, maintenance of vehicles. So we are backing out of that 159, 50,000 for contracting those services. So that leaves us with a balance of 109,000. Estimated cost for paid staff. A full-time chief, salary plus benefits, is going to be about $240,000. Full-time firefighter, salary plus benefits, is about $100,000. That gives us $340,000, or $340,000. Taking the credit from the previous slide, we have to come up with $231,000. What does that mean for the taxpayer? Currently, this is the tax rate right now. That's what we all paid. It's $131 for $100,000 in assessment. So depending on the assessment of your house, that's what you're currently paying. If we were to implement this back in time, and it would increase your taxes by $23 for a $100,000 home. If you are assessed at $300,000, it would increase your annual tax to $69. That's the nuts and bolts of it. I want to stress this. We talked 5.5 minutes per average American for volunteer. No volunteer fire department in America would exist with 5.5 minutes per person on their staff. So these guys and girls, these members are putting in way more, not even double, triple, quadruple, way above that. Right, they're blowing the 5.5 out of the water. This department or any department doesn't exist without our members. The problem is we have a lot more residents, a lot more assets to protect, and we have less firefighters. So we're unable to backfill our current volunteer with new recruits. That means we're putting more burden on our current volunteers. So that initial training plus the minimum calls, that was the minimum. If you don't have enough members, you need them to do more than the minimum. So we're asking more with less people. Given the current trends, it's impossible to maintain a fully volunteer fire service in the future. Adding paid staff is the next logical step. Right, it's the natural progression of the fire service. Rural towns definitely work with volunteer fire service. I had to drive to work 2 weeks ago to Vermont. We went up through Governor, North Country. There was a ton of volunteer fire departments. They make sense in these areas. Right? Your nearest neighbor is a mile and a half. We're talking maybe the size of our district, but today, not back in 1949. But as the district has grown, as the needs have grown, unfortunately, volunteerism has not grown to meet that need. So here's the rules for public comments. You got to come up to the podium, one person at a time. You will be allowed to speak once for 3 minutes. We will keep track of your 3-minute timer. State your name and address before you start speaking. You must remain respectful and professional at all times. If you do not, we'll ask you to leave. we have a list, okay. So we will start right at the top. Linda.
Most of the questions and answers go, continue to I have.
Got most here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Raymond Laprise. And our official time.
Barbara Raymond Laprise, 3409 Patrick Road. At the July department meeting, you stated that in January you started conversations regarding response times. Who were those conversations with? Was it between yourselves and just the chiefs, or did you hold general meetings with the department membership to learn more about why response times are reduced? Did you meet with other districts to ascertain their response rates? In the past year and a half, did you ever express concerns about response rates during the public meetings of the Board of Fire Commissioners? During that same time, did you express your concerns to the membership during your monthly report to the monthly department meeting to the membership? The chief at the monthly department meetings reports that the average number of members attending calls. Never has he even expressed concerns to the membership about those numbers, and they are consistently about 9 people. Is that information that he's providing incorrect, or is there just some reason why we're not getting valid information? Why have your concerns not been brought out in a public forum until today? Are you confident that you've explored other options in that the discussions were very limited in scope? So if we think about it, when will the paid staff respond? Will they be there during the daytime only? Will they come during nighttime hours? Are they going to be required to live in the district? Will the paid chief be required to live in the district like the current rules are that the district has, or will they be changing that? Will he be required to meet the New York State training and physical requirements for a paid chief? So if you can answer some of those questions, I'd appreciate it.
Real quick, I stated in the beginning, this is the beginning of a long process. We don't have all the answers. New York State requires us to have this hearing first before we continue down the career combination department. So I cannot answer those questions at this time. I don't know the details. Herb Curtis. No. Errol?
Carol Curtis, 110 Lincoln Ave. I've been a member with Belgium Cold Springs for 40 years. I have a question. You say you want a paid chief and 2 paid firefighters. Is that going to be enough? Because you're going to have a paid firefighter drive the engine if it's a fire, and a paid firefighter that has to hook up to the fire hydrant. So where's it going to go from there? Because we don't have anybody to drag the hose into the buildings to fight the fire. So I would like to...
Again, I got to go back to the same answer. We don't know the details of where the staffing will be, what time they'll be, what jobs they'll be given, so that we will determine that once we get past this step. We're budgeting for a paid chief to pay firefighters.
That still doesn't really answer. I mean, the 2 paid firefighters, one's going to be a driver, and after he hooks up the hydrant, then maybe he can drag the hose into the fire. But you're kind of a waste.
Yeah, I don't know that the paid will be drivers. I don't know that the paid will be drivers. Our short isn't on drivers, it's on interior maintenance. But again, I don't know the answer. We haven't gotten it.
Have you looked into other departments that have gone paid and volunteers together, how they work out?
Yeah, so Chief Hildreth of Fayetteville Fire Department probably has one of the most successful combination departments out there. He has paid staff, and they have a very strong volunteer program as well. They do it a little differently than we do. I don't know that we'll be working with the department to figure that out, but Fayetteville, for the most part, does overnights for the volunteers, and days are covered by paid staff.
These are questions, questions, I mean, everybody's got questions,
But again, yeah, to clear, we are not implementing this tomorrow. We may not be implementing this in a month. We may not be implementing this in 5 years. But in order for us to legally move forward with this hearing is required to show you that we are moving forward with this.
So
Want to.
so the district, I mean, well, there's some people here from the district, if they don't want it, what will, are you commissioners just gonna move forward with it anyways?
So if you remember, the district's responsibility, our responsibility, the five up here, is to make sure our fire and EMS service meets the needs of the fire taxpayers. Right now, we have a 10% scratch rate, which means right now, 10% is about 50 calls a year. We can't do it. The fire district cannot allow that. So
I wasn't gonna say anything, but, you know, you should have been thinking about recruiting maybe 5 years ago or more, instead of getting rid of dedicated firefighters and people retiring or quitting, and spending thousands of dollars on it, and people get suspended.
we're not going to bring up personnel issues.
Huh?
You can't bring up personnel issues.
Oh, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie, please.
Good evening, Charlie LaPreeze, 3409 Hatchet Road, also a member of the Belgium Cold Springs Fire Department. He brought up multiple times about the age of the members being 60 plus. What has been done as far as recruitment and retention? We talked about going house to house and welcoming the people. What else has been done to bring in new people? We talked about the school. What else has been done? That ended, what, 2 years ago, I think, the school ended, as far as the coalition. Succession planning, what's happened with that? You said that this is going to take time to implement that this is not going to happen overnight. Has there been succession planning in the past 5 years? No, there hasn't. Nobody's thought about it. I brought it up 3 years ago. We don't have, I was told, no, we don't have succession planning. And yet here we are today. We're looking at paid staff, paid department. As of today, we have had 297 calls. 50 of those calls were made during working hours when John and Jerry were here. So 50 of those calls were out of those 297 calls. The remainder were after hours. What time are the paid people? And again, as Carol said, 2 people, 3 people are not enough. It does not make up a crew. Thank you.
Tom Perkins, Chief Perkins.
I'm not a taxpayer. I'll let the taxpayer go first.
Chief Corbett.
You've answered all my questions.
John Mattel? Jack? Marty Quinn, no. Brent Messer?
Brant Messer, 3404 Patchett Road, I live down the road. I think the figures are woefully short because they're going to have to be paid prevailing wage. Probably $120,000 each with a total benefit package. Whenever they reach retirement age, then you have to pay their pension. So you have 3 people on, they work X amount of years, then those people retire, so you're going to be paying these people virtually for the next 50, 60 years, and their pension is going to be equal to about $60,000. So I think you can dramatically increase what these people are going to be paid. City of Syracuse fireman retires $65,000 a year, which, because these people would be prevailing wage, they would end up with their pension, their medical, and all that, which they would retain. So it's not going to be $300,000 a year. It might be for the first year, but then it's going to increase exponentially as people come in, retire. Are they needed? That's not for me to decide. But I see a dramatic increase in what the cost is going to be over the years. That's all I have to say.
Rita?
Yes.
Jan Graham?
I'm good.
Steve? Can't read the last name. Andrew?
Steve Darkwinkle, 2391 Crash Road. I think you got a daunting task, quite honestly, the presentation is very good in giving the numbers. I guess I never realized that I have a pretty good view of what goes on here and live directly across the street, so I've seen the activities. The one thing that I think the numbers were somewhat maybe misleading. I don't mean to say that in a way that's critical, but I think many of the times were overlapped. It's training time and then the required for certain services. They get those, they meet those obligations through training quite often. Of all the statistics up there, the one that I would like to see, two things I'd like to see. One, I would like to see the dollar value of property lost in our district in an average year or each year over a 10-year period, and the injuries and loss of life. And then from that, I would like to know some estimate that you've determined there's going to be a reduction as a result of having a paid forest. If you were to tell me that the property loss in our district is $5 million a year, and by having a paid forest, you're going to drop that to $1 million, then that's pretty compelling. But if you're telling me that the property value lost in the district on an average year over the last 10 years is $1.1 billion, and we think that we've got to drop it to $1 million with a paid staff, and loss of life has been, I don't know what it is, but let's say there's been two loss of life in fire responses in the last 10 years, and you think you can reduce that to zero. Those numbers mean something to me, and I would like to see those, and I think that they would be compelling in whether or not I were to support something. The other thing I think is important, I don't know a lot about the fire district, but my guess would be that as you bring on paid firefighters, you're going to find it more difficult yet to get volunteers. And maybe that hasn't been the experience in doing it in other locations, but my guess would be that getting volunteers to continue to be a part of the department when you have a paid staff may become more difficult. If you were to research it and find that is the case, I think you should make a presentation for an entire paid fire department, because your step to go part paid may result in years from now having to be fully paid. And many of us will be taxpayers when that day comes. So I think we deserve to have an understanding of what it might be someday in the future.
Thank you. Kim Brannigan?
Kim Brannigan, 3260 Patchett Road. On one of these plaques up here, my name is listed as a firefighter of the year. It was a small, tiny spark in a big pan, not even a flash in the pan. So I've been through the whole process of becoming a member and doing the training and going to the meetings and being the secretary of the fire department. There's a lot involved, and I'm not going to dispute any numbers. I'm just going to tell you that it's time consuming. And I do have so many comments from the presentation. Number one, if we're not talking about this now, what's going to happen when all of a sudden we don't have enough people to respond at all? I don't want it to be my house that burns down. I don't want to have my mother have a heart attack and nobody comes to my house to help her. I think that you need to really consider what the value of protecting your own stuff and your own family is. And then I also want to be confident that when I call my fire department, I'm not going to say, oh, geez, I really hope that my firefighters are here this week or today, and they're not on vacation. They totally deserve that vacation. They shouldn't be tied to their fire department. But volunteers, it's not. There's other commitments. There's just a lot of commitments. And when I was a firefighter, recruiting was a big part of that whole process. We had a lot of endeavors and a lot of things that we did. So recruiting isn't something that we're just now thinking about doing. It was a big, strong drive back then, and we just haven't. As you can see, the stats, it's just proven that we are experiencing the nationwide problem with getting and retaining volunteers. So congratulations to the board for doing something and not sticking their head in the sand, and good luck.
Doug Sandbrook?
Doug Sandbrook, 3211 Patrick Road. Thank you for bringing this up. I think it's time to have heartfelt discussions. Volunteerism is on the decline. We see it within the healthcare industry. We see it within EMS. Our healthcare industry is in shambles, and we're struggling. We're struggling to get ambulances out the door. We're struggling to get the fire service out the door. Some of the things I'd really ask us to look at are the standards, right? We want to see a staffed engine on the scene of a fire within 4 minutes. That's a nationwide standard. How do we maintain that in our community? Can we meet that in our community? For a suburban community, the ideal staffing within 8 minutes of a structure fire is a minimum of 10 men with a goal of 15. How do we get that with our volunteerism today? We're not. I would ask you with your staffing model and what you're considering, I would ask you to consider two things. One, don't hire firefighter EMTs, hire firefighter paramedics. We're seeing delays in EMS responses, and having a firefighter paramedic may make a difference for somebody. With that being said, staffing. I don't think hiring a paid chief and 2 firefighters is quite honestly enough. I don't know if we need a paid administrator. I have 27 years in the volunteer fire service, chief executive. So, past chief, prior to moving to Baltimore, I've been here 7 years. I do think you need to consider staffing 3 to 4 firefighters so that you can actually conduct fire suppression operations. I think it's a hard discussion and where to go. So happy to have discussions and help what you need. Thank you.
Drawer Matt?
I'm good.
Jay, I'm guessing that's Joe? Joe?
Joe.
Oh, no. Okay.
In the air, Jeremy.
Oh, here he is.
Joe Rotelli, 3583 Patchett Road, just down the road. I understand that you're not going to have all the answers. You keep on talking about this at the beginning. Do you have any timeline in place? I mean, in mind? Like you're thinking about January 1st to actually have this started? Or what is the?
So we have to work with a bunch of different governmental agencies, civil service, writing up the job descriptions, get it, so we don't know. So-
Does that go through civil service and stuff? No, it does. And would paid firemen be part of a fireman's union? Don't know.
I would assume, I don't know.
So, again, is there a timeline in your mind?
I think depending on working with the other agencies, that would determine.
So it could happen in a month, it could happen in 6 months? I'm
I don't
picking
know.
these up,
Yeah,
don't know.
don't know. Again, step one,
Right.
to a multi-step, get us working with those different agencies, and then with the job descriptions. You gotta get a test put together.
Would you have to have another public hearing before you make the decision? No. So after this, you guys can just make the call. Is that correct? Is that the game plan?
This is the only public hearing part. We have to let the public know for the announcement that we are looking at paid staff.
I realize that I guess is the legal requirement. Is that the plan? So you don't have any other communication with the public plan. So there's going to be more decisions made. Some of these answers will be answered because you have to answer them, because you can't move forward without answering them. Are you going to come back and express those answers to anybody, or just kind of make the call?
I don't know. We'll get to this.
The $50,000 that you're putting aside for snow plowing, mowing lawns, maintenance of, I suppose, I gotta assume that's including maintenance of the lawns and the property, right? Cutting down trees, all those kind of things for $50,000. That also, have you thought about, like, I believe these floors are stripped probably every other year? Stripped and waxed every year, every other year?
Try to every year.
Try them every year. I know, like, the kitchen has to be scrubbed at least once a year. All those kind of things, just normal maintenance things that, now, will that be under the paid firemen's kind of purview, or is it mostly just light maintenance that they do? I realize that they're gonna clean the bathrooms, they're gonna, wash the windows, keep the place clean, that kind of stuff, but anything more, I mean, they have to be hired. The roof leaks because the drains up on the roof are clogged. Right now, we have people that go up there, normal thing, they go up there and unclog it. And actually, they go up there every year and probably 2 or 3 times a year to unclog all that. Is that going to be paid separately? Have to hire somebody to do all that kind of stuff? Who knows? To be determined. I think that $50,000, I can't remember who mentioned, I think you're a little light on those figures. But, okay, I didn't know what the timeline here was. I am disappointed though that you guys are thinking about doing this without getting some of these answers back to the public. I think the public deserves some of that. But there are a lot of questions. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Joe.
And think about mutual aid. Are these paid firemen going on mutual aid? Kevin Road?
Kevin Road, 1405 Greenwell Way. For those who don't know, I'm also licensed town council. I got the one question this gentleman just asked about mutual aid and your paid staff. How would that work with the other volunteer departments and across the river? You'd be expecting people who are paid people, how would that go across? With 3 paid staff, 2 fire departments, how do you plan on where do we at? Which trucks do you need? Where's your equipment? I know GBACs having issues. Kit knows. I was on one of the liaisons on the Public Safety Committee for a couple of years. This is not a Belgian issue. This is a town statewide issue. This this conversation should be being had with every volunteer area in our town. Because you don't want to see houses burn because we don't have staff. And everybody here knows people don't have a lot of time. They've tried recruiting. I've watched recruiting attempts for years that just don't go anywhere. And it's just part of life. I don't have time to be a volunteer fireman. I had an uncle who was a chief. I had a grandfather who was a chief in Lyson. It's just not easy to do anymore for people that work. I would like you guys to also talk to the other fire districts and see where they're at with this. I know years ago, there was a study done with all the fire companies about manpower, locations of stations, equipment needed. Maybe a town-wide issue could solve this problem. Maybe we don't need 7 departments covering the whole town. You know, totally, I think it costs the town of Lysander $3 to $4 million in fire service across the entire town. That money could be pooled if we get people on the same page. I know that's not easy. I attended the public safety committee meetings. I know where that's at. One more question is insurance rates. With the scratching of calls, does that affect the insurance over the district? And would that get worse? You know, does that affect homeowners insurance? Because it's going to affect your homeowner's insurance by a couple $100 a year. Paid staff will alleviate that issue. I commend you for your work so far.
Thank you. Lynn Tanner.
Lynn Tanner, 8782 West River Road, and any other comments I make is mine and my own, not my husband's, who's in the board here. I do want to say thank you for the time you put into it. It is easy being a volunteer on top of being a member of the department in any way that you are, so thank you for that. And any of my comments would be that it is just, to me, it's kind of a sad day, kind of a sad situation that we're at this place, but also I don't feel that it's been very much handled in this being the only public forum, and that Joe asked most of the questions I was going to ask. I feel like after we walk out of here today, this can just get voted in and approved, and at the next commissioners meeting that most of the people here are going to be at, and then we won't get answers to any of the questions. And it is something that obviously is important, needs to be looked at, but if that's the case and it's that important, then I think more research needs to be done. This needs to be tabled, and a second complimentary public meeting needs to be done, even if it's not a requirement. It still would be something that maybe the people in this room would like to have. I think there's more of an underlying problem that's been in the department for a number of years. So when you look at the number of membership, I think that the PowerPoint was very informative, with a number of numbers from 1949 or whatever to now. If you focus more on just the last 5 to 7 years, I think you see that membership went down. And I think that's where, in addition to looking at hiring paid staff, maybe we need to look at why have the numbers gone down with the volunteers? Why are people not volunteering as much? Why are people left in other departments? Is it just, do a survey monkey, do something for free, get a counselor in here and talk in small groups, see what the actual fire personnel, men and women, are saying. Is it time constraints? I completely agree. Volunteering is hard, kids will keep you busy, stuff like that. There's been a lot of grumblings though. Anybody that's here that's been part of the department knows over the years there's been grumblings, there's morale issues. You have a great group of people that I think are overlooking how to make that better first before you just add something else to the puzzle. This is a Band-Aid, not a fix, and you're just going to have more problems down the road. I'd also say labor pool. Nowadays, you either can't get supplies because of COVID or you can't hire people because there's not enough people to train. I've never hired a trained fire chief, but I don't know what kind of labor pool there is out there, so I don't know if it would take a month or a year, how many trained chiefs there are available to hire, but that would be something else that I would wonder about. I also wonder about the timeline and the next step, because again, it could be voted in at the July commissioners meeting, August, September, whenever, But I wondered, the annual election is in December, if I'm not mistaken, and isn't that when chief speech or any car one, et cetera, that election, if I'm not mistaken, is going to happen, voted on, announced in January. So if he can't run again, because he's already reached his quota, then isn't a decision have to be made by then, because otherwise we're on car one, we don't have a chief in January. So that would be my thought, and I do think, thank you very much for your time to look into it. I think the research is important. No, I don't want my house burning down, and I don't want my husband to have a heart attack and not get a response to, but I think we still have the right to get some of these questions answered. Thank you for your time.
Jerry?
No comment.
Mark Harris? Vince Karen?
Oh, I slept too long. Vince Kearney, 7608 Merritt Drive. Been a member here 30 some odd years. And we have a unique perspective. I also served as the chief of the department for 6 years or better. And I was also assistant chief for number 18. So I've got some background in the leadership of this department. As long as I can remember, as chief of the department, you make a lot of sacrifices. There are, what year we had on the list there is a tip of the iceberg. And I always, as I matured through the process, I said, wow, this is a full-time job, and then I also have a full-time job. I'm just not just an easy full-time job that pays the bills. So I spoke to Kid a few times in the past, and I said, well, it might be time to get a big chief in this place so somebody can dedicate their time to do those things that need to be done for the district. So I'm in support of hiring a paid chief. As far as the rest of it goes, I think we should hire the chief, and at that point, hire the guy that you feel is going to be the guy that will pick folks that work with volunteers, or hire the guy that will work with volunteers only. So we're kind of playing.
Thank you, Chief. There's two here that don't have a yes or no one wants to speak, so Frank. Yeah. Do you want to comment?
Sure.
Okay, Frank's.
Frank and staff, 3150 Patrick Road. I have a few questions. What's the difference between a paid staff and a volunteer? How are you going to get the paid staff in if you don't get the volunteers? Because, how's that going to, change your situation? Is it going to change it? And who's this paid chief going to be? Is he going to be a chief that's already being elected by your people? Or are you going to go out in the field and find somebody new? Where does it stand? I don't like the idea that this is the only forum that we're going to be in, that there should be more. The question should be answered that we're asked tonight. We have the right. You guys should just be able to make a decision without our input. I think it's unfair, and it's not just you guys that do this, it's the town, it's everybody. Okay? To have your minds made up before we even walk in the room. Okay? And I see it all the time. And I go in the first place I've been the town of Clay, I've been Millis, I've been all over the place. And you guys already make your mind up, and then we just gotta go with it. And you at least have an audience. So that makes you guys think that you're doing something for the people, but you're not. We can't make that decision. So that's all I have.
Thank you. John O'Connell. That's the end of the list. Thank you all for your time. What did you want to talk about? Oh, Chief Perkins.
I'd just like to say what Vince said. How many times have you and I had that exact conversation? I represent a couple of hats here tonight. I'm the chairman of the Lysander Public Safety Committee and also on the Fire Advisory Board for Onondaga County. And I'd like to thank the board for doing something. We've been talking at a county level and at a town level for 20 years about what to do, but we've never done anything. We talk about recruitment and retention. It hasn't worked. I was on the Fire Advisory Board a number of years ago. I went back on last year, and I'm looking through the agenda. And so I raised my hand to the chairman, and I said, I was on this board just 20 years ago. We're talking about the same damn things today that we were talking about 20 years ago. And we have got to take a bold move in the fire service in this county. And we're not doing it. We're just throwing dollars at it. Not even dollars at it. We're just throwing ideas, and nobody ever wants to do anything. So I applaud you for making that bold step that needs to be made in the fire service in this county.
Anyone else who had the smoke want to speak? Okay.
I have one more question for you, actually. With an additional staffing, will you actually reduce duplication of equipment? Across?
Yeah. To be determined, but yeah.
We'll ask the district secretary to read any written public comments which have been submitted.
For a phone call from Paul Pava, 3465 Cold Springs Road, New York, on July 11th, he asked that it be noted that he is strongly in favor of the proposal to hire a paid chief and paid staff to respond to emergency calls. He thinks it should have been done before now. He values the fire department's services, but feels they need to be supplemented. He was unable to attend tonight due to a family commitment. And then this is from our current fire chief, Matt's speech. The Board of Fire Commissioners, members of the Belgium Cold Springs Fire Department, employees of the Belgium Cold Springs Fire District, and members of our community. In the volunteer fire departments across the country, there are many factors that lead to the need to hire a paid chief and paid firefighters and EMTs to manage the operational and administrative tasks of the volunteer combination fire department. Reasons may include but are not limited to a population increase in our fire districts, changes in hazards, increased workload, public demand, or legal considerations, to name a few. It's not that our volunteer firefighters are not valuable. You absolutely are. It's just that eventually most roles outgrow the duties and reasonable time commitment of a volunteer position, and that can cap our growth. It's important to look at the change as a supplement to our current volunteers and not a replacement to our current membership. While we may be lucky to have a thriving volunteer force now, we are quickly falling in line with the national trend of declining volunteerism. So it's imperative to begin the planning process and building data now so that we are prepared to try to stay ahead of the trend of our declining volunteers. Looking at our growth numbers and projections for the next 10 years and beyond, it's imperative that we start having these conversations now and get a plan in place to successfully transition from an all-volunteer department to a combination department. As the demand for volunteer and EMS services continues to grow in our community, we need to ask how we will continue to answer the call. If not with volunteers, then by whom? The answer is a combination of volunteer and paid personnel. As the demand for services outpaces our ability to deliver those services, our commissioners are faced with the decision to transition from a fully volunteer to some form of combination system. There is no approach to this process, and our commissioners have taken the time to recognize the signals that are in this change. They have studied the issues and obstacles from an internal and external perspectives that drove the decision. They identified the key players, the
It says that.
I'm going to continue reading this. There is no standard approach to this process, but I believe our commissioners have taken the time to recognize the signals that warrant this change. They've studied the issues and obstacles from an internal and external perspective that drove their decision. They've identified the key players who will be involved in assessing, planning, implementing, and evaluating the plan, and have tried to make themselves aware of many common pitfalls and issues that can surround a decision of this magnitude. I understand that there is an emotional and uncertain time within the Belgium Wood Springs Fire Department, and I can sympathize with you regarding your apprehensions and concerns. But I wholeheartedly believe that the commissioners have the members, employees, and community they serve best interest in mind as they make these tough decisions. We all recognize that every member's personal investment within our department is significant, with many of us giving regular contributions of 20 or more hours per week in our recognition within the community. And I can understand your fear of being replaced by career firefighters. That is why I must emphasize again that the addition of paid staff is to supplement our dedicated volunteers to help lift some of the burden of hours spent away from home and your families. We still need you. Everyone's contribution, whether large or small, play a huge role in how we operate. Please do not fear that this is an attempt to minimize the necessity or influence our volunteers have in Belgium Wood Springs. I realize that you may feel blindsided, you may not understand why change is needed, and what needs to be done to accomplish these changes. You will probably experience a range of feelings that could shape your responses to these changes. But we must be ready to look at the solution before us and adapt to an ever-changing environment, much like we did over the past few years as we worked through a global pandemic. There may be some fear, uncertainty, or doubt on your part, but I know that the commissioners have studied the data and have looked at all possible solutions to address the concerns of our members, employees, and community so that we continue to provide the best service we can to our community. That is why I support the decisions made by the Board of Fire Commissioners to make this transition. Now is the right time to begin this process. The longer we wait, and by putting off having these discussions and implementing changes, we will be doing ourselves and our community a disservice. Respectfully, Matthew Speech, Chief of the Belgium Wood Springs Fire Department. He could not be here to touch the word this evening.
Thank you. Again, is there anyone who has not had an opportunity to speak who would like to speak? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the hearing. Mike Carroll, second by Mike Malone. All in favor? We are adjourned.